Hello, young students. This is part two of the period two review. Hopefully, this goes a little smoother than part one. Here we are in the Middle East. Ottoman Empire started back in period one, but they're still going strong. There's Sunnis. They have that Dev Shermay where they use the Christian boys for their army called the Janissaries. They've got huge monumental architecture where they turn the large Eastern Orthodox churches of Constantinople into mosques, and then they build some of their own as well. They're also got some really killer gunpowder weapons. They use those when they conquer Constantinople in 1453, blowing huge holes in the walls, kind of like this coffee cup right here. It's like, boom! And then they took Constantinople. It's very exciting. Safavid Empire. And by the way, the Ottomans, the Safavids, and actually the Mughals back in India, they're all going to have gunpowder weapons because the gunpowder has come across the Silk Road and is now, being used to kill people in all these empires, Ottomans, Safavid, Mughals, and also in Europe. They're all Turks. The Mughals, Ottomans, Safavids are all Turkic people that are also Muslims. Safavids are going to be modern day Iran, and the leader is going to enforce Shiite Islam on his population. He's going to say, we are the ones, we are the victims, the underdogs of Islam. Do not forget it. And basically uses that sort of anger at the Sunnis for what they did way back in the 600s to fuel conflict with the Sunni Ottoman Empire. Yeah, good times. Here's a map, okay? Got your Ottomans, there's Sunnis, Safavids, modern Iran, Shia, Mughals. I think they were Sunnis as well, but it's not important. Please remember, they all have gunpowder. They all have monumental architecture. I forgot to mention the Mughals have the Taj Mahal and other large mosques that they build. And then off here in Africa is the Songhai Empire. And they are like the latest, the period two version of the earlier Ghana and Mali empires. They are Islamic, and they benefit from the trans-Saharan trade routes with the traders taxing the trade coming across the Sahara and also being Islamic because of that trade. Moving on. Americas, finally. So we got big changes. Sorry, natives. 90% of you are going to die. So think of COVID times 100. Terrible. Smallpox. The Europeans bring the diseases on the boats starting in 1492. It's called the Columbian Exchange because of our brother, Christopher Columbus. Is the one that staged this whole thing, crossing and becoming famous. Please remember the Aztecs and the Incas are present at the beginning of period two and are conquered during this period quickly on by the Spanish, whose pure motivation was gold. But they also brought a lot of religion with them, Catholic Christianity. And they're going to have a huge impact on the locals. So let's talk a little bit about that. The timeline here doesn't show it very well. But basically, right away, the Spanish start, and I'll show you the map in a minute, start large mainland colonies in North America and treat the locals pretty poorly, use them for forced labor, on the encomiendas, the haciendas. They use the Mita system in the silver mine at Potosi, forcing the Spanish, forcing the locals to work in the mine, doing the most dangerous jobs. And that Mita system was previously the Inca's system. And then so the Spanish come and they use it on them. What else happens? Catholic Christianity comes. Hopefully you remember that. And please remember the locals always like to try to keep some of their old stuff. So there's a lot of blending going on. And you're also going to have some new religions because the Africans slaves are going to bring their polytheistic animistic religions and then blend it with Christianity. Santeria literally hiding behind Christianity, making it look like they're being Christians when they're not. Voodoo. I'm not sure if they were hiding it as much, but they did sync up with Christian holidays and stuff. And I guess they probably tried to make it sound like they were Christian, but they definitely weren't. It is also the time of the sugar plantations in Brazil and then in the Caribbean. And as you know, that will be the big destination of most transatlantic slaves. And so the slave trade will start. I don't know why the date's not here, but the slave trade starts basically right in the early 1500s and lasts all the way until 1888 in Brazil. And also in Latin America and the sugar colonies, there's going to be massive amounts of racial mixing because the Spanish and whatever, they mostly bring men over there. They have relations with the local woman. And these mixed race children, or with slaves, and these mixed race children are become a new middle class. So they're no longer low class, and they've kind of formed the new middle class of Latin America and the Caribbean. And this system of the natives being at the bottom or the slaves at the bottom, the mixed race people who are known as mestizos if they are native and European, and they're known as mulattoes if they're slave and European. And at the top of the social order, please remember the peninsulares. Those are Europeans born in Europe. They were at the top, and then right below them are the Creoles, who are the Europeans born in the Americas. So the Creoles are basically going to always remain on top of the Caribbean, Latin American social order, even to this day. Moving on. Here's a map. So please note, there's a lot more going on in the Americas than what I talked about on the last slide. You've got also early exploration by the Dutch and the British and the French, and they are going to head over. The Dutch will be the first owners of Manhattan Island, for example. The French will claim a lot of land in what is now Canada, and everyone at first was trying to find a Northwest Passage, another way to Asia. Didn't work out, but they tried. They froze, but they tried. We also have the beginning of our British colonies, become the good old US of A, with slavery there as well in the South. Protestant Christianity brought here more, so less conversion of the natives. Yeah, fun times. All right, the silver trade. This really isn't on any slide, I don't think, but it's here. The silver trade is booms with the Potosi mine in the early, I think it's 1540. Basically, the Spanish start pulling out 85% of the world's silver out of that mine and other mines. And so the Spanish silver on boats will be the first global circulation of stuff all over the world, including the Pacific Ocean. And a lot of it's going to end up in China, where they need it for their economy, and also everyone wants to buy China's products, the silk, the tea, the porcelain, the lacquerware, all that stuff. And so a lot of silver goes to China, and a lot of Chinese products then get sold around the world. But the silver goes many places. The slave trade, again, roughly 1500 to the late 1800s. The main source of the slaves was West Africa. Please note that long before this slave trade existed, there were African slave trade with slaves being brought across the Sahara on the trans-Saharan trade route. There's also slavery where? On East Africa being sold in the Indian Ocean slave trade. And slaves are being sold up into Europe. These are African slaves, and a lot into the Islamic world. But however, with the Atlantic slave trade, it just gets a lot worse. Lives completely destroyed, people broken, taken across an ocean, treated as chattel slavery, with very, very high death rate and very little effort made to keep slaves alive, especially on the sugar plantations. Good job, Europe. What else? Some of the kingdoms in Africa do benefit selling people into slavery. But it's a highly disruptive process where even in some of the kingdoms that benefit, middle class, upper class noblemen are being sold into slavery and disrupting life in these places. Obviously a horrible result. Since we're on this map, please remember the Columbian Exchange and the fact that new food crops come to the Americas and all the new animals like the horse, the cow, the pig, the sheep, and big food crops like the best one to remember is probably the potato and corn, cassava to Africa, sweet potato and peanuts also to China. And all these these American foods brought over to Europe, China, and Africa are going to have a huge impact on populations of these places as far as population increase. The only reason Africa's population doesn't boom because of this new food is, of course, because of the slave trade pulling Africans out. All right, I think I'm done. Thank you, and hopefully this was helpful. Have a great day.